As a business intelligence tool, it is revolutionary. As the AI race picks up, it's all about speed. It used to be that things would happen every quarter, and then they happened every month, and now every week or even every day. Increased water intensity of each chip that's made means that that is going to be a bigger and bigger deal. Some of these fabs are put in places where one's left scratching one's head about where the water's going to come from. Tens of billions to build. The real revelation was when we put a chatbot on top of it. It was just complete mayhem.
Welcome to part 2 of the Salty Water Podcast with Christopher Gasson, the force behind global water intelligence and one of the most trusted voices in global water. In this episode, we go deeper into how AI is reshaping the industry, how conflict in the Middle East is impacting water strategy, and where billions of investment are flowing next. AI data centers, as you well know, demand large volumes of both electricity and water for their operations. Many site-specific proposals exceed the capacity of local utilities to provide sufficient water. The integration and adoption of AI has the potential to bring efficiency in system design and plant operations. What is your view on these topics, and how do you see AI in your world, in the world of the
Well, we see it in lots of different ways. So first of all, I think that when you look at the AI supply chain, there are three main parts to it. There is the data centers themselves, which actually use very little water. They matter, though, because they tend to locate themselves in places which, without thinking of whether their water is available or not. Water is like the 18th reason why they'd locate somewhere. The first reason is how quickly can you build it? Second reason, how cheap is the power and how reliable is it? Third reason is how cheap is the real estate? Water is way, way down. And as a result, they end up in places where water may be an issue or it may not be an issue, but it's not like locating a chemical plant where nobody locates a chemical plant in the middle of nowhere. They may locate chemical plants where the water is because they use a hell of a lot of water. Yeah. Then there's the power consumption, the water consumed in by the power consumption. And that is material at the moment. But most of the big data center operators have made commitments to buy renewable energy. And renewable energy uses a lot less water than conventional thermoelectric power. The overall demand may level off from the power demand, the water-related power demand. Sorry, the power-related water demand may level off in time simply because more and more of it will come from renewable energy. Now, I had a little sort of bit of a debate about this last week in California, because what people seem to be saying is that as the AI race picks up, it's all about speed. I don't know if you've been noticing this, but it used to be that things would happen every quarter and then they happened every month, and now every week or even every day, there's some massive new launch that affects the way that one sees the business. And that need for speed, I think, is only going to grow. And I think that it's actually a lot easier to do a single cycle or combined cycle gas turbine to get power on site quickly than to go through the process of getting that solar plant up and running. Yeah. Or indeed a wind farm. So it may be that the power demand does grow, and this power demand will be in funny places. Elon Musk he built one of his Grok data centers in 4 months, but he did that using single cycle gas turbine, power generation that does not need water because they're not using a steam turbine. And you can do that in Texas without worrying about the water. And then there's the third bit is the chip fabs, and these are seriously thirsty, and they're getting thirstier. So what's happening as the AI revolution sort of continues is that the size of the chips and the number of layers in them that need to be etched is growing. Sorry, the size is getting smaller, but the number of layers is increasing, and each sort of additional layer essentially is another cycle of washing and masking and etching. That means that we think that the combination of increased demand for chips together with increased water intensity of each chip that's made means that that is going to be a bigger and bigger deal. Yeah. And some of these fabs are put in places where one's left scratching one's head about where the water's going to come from. So I'm sure that when TSMC decided to locate in Phoenix, they thought, well, they were probably reassured by the governor of Arizona that the water would be there. And that's all right. So they build 2 fabs, but then it turns out they need 5 fabs, and those fabs are going to be even bigger. And at the same time, Arizona's got to reduce its drawing from the Colorado.
Yeah.
So how's that going to work?
Yeah. You're in a desert.
I mean, that's going to be interesting. But I mean, so that's the supply chain side. And as I see it, we're certainly seeing a huge amount of growth in the microelectronics business. We have something called Ultra Facility, which is about essentially the utilities for the AI revolution, particularly around chip fabs. It used to be called Ultra Pure Water, but we've branched out to do more than just water. And that business has grown massively as a result of this.
Oh, interesting.
This AI revolution. I bought this Ultra Pure Water Journal and the event that went with it, I guess in 2012. And it basically did nothing for 10 years. And then they passed the CHIPS Act. And suddenly it went to the moon. Everyone needed to know about Ultra Pure Water. And it's a really high stakes thing. These fabs cost tens of billions to build. Right. And the American government was telling everyone to build them. But turns out, actually, everyone just wants the TSMC chips. Whether they can actually, all get the demand they need, it's a different thing. But it's certainly been a great business for us. But on the sort of impact of AI, there's a sort of different story. I mean, for our business, it's been completely revolutionary. Yeah. At the end of last year, we launched this thing called Water Investment Navigator, which started out as a list of all the projects that I think the top 1,000 US utilities were pursuing, which we did some AI scraping and turned in a database, sort of fair enough. And nobody else had that kind of depth of project listing. And then we added in the decisions made from the council minutes made on those projects. And that was also sort of interesting, but not sort of really the killer app. And then we started listening into the council meetings themselves. This was in July last year when the ChatGPT 5 was launched, and we could do it in real time, taking the sort of YouTube versions of the council meetings. And we could put this all into the database. And yes, we could extract the decisions out of it. But the real revelation was when we put a chatbot on top of it and allowed people to ask questions like, which cities in America are considering desalination, or which engineers have got a bad reputation with their customers, which construction companies have overdue on delivering projects, or who needs activated carbon, or whatever it is. You just have a chatbot on front of basically hundreds of council meetings that are happening all of the time.
Wow.
And as a business intelligence tool, it is revolutionary. But there's a nice D-style story attached to this. So when we first started doing this back in July, one of the first meetings we sort of tapped into was this one in Corpus Christi, where it was an 11-hour meeting. I mean, Tom Pankrat watched the whole thing of it and wrote a sort of great story about it. I mean, people were in tears. 3 people were arrested. It was just complete mayhem. There's a guy turning up, guns, trying to say that he had a Second Amendment right to use them in the chamber. And also, he didn't want any of this decorum. It was against his right to free speech, and he got taken away by the police, swearing at the council men. I mean, it was just, but the AI couldn't handle it. 11 hours, and I mean, I have to say, it was just such nonsense. Sure. This was the Corpus Christi desal plant, which they managed to, I mean, it's a relatively small plant in global terms. They were trying to agree something like a $1.1 billion price tag for it. Right. And that was just madness. I mean, it was literally 10 times what the price of the same plant would have been in the Gulf. Yeah. And the kit's the same. The main difference are as I say, the cost of doing business in America. Yeah. And I suppose there's a few of the construction workers might cost a little bit more, but it doesn't justify 10 times the cost.
Right. Well, that's interesting that AI has revolutionized your ability to scrape data and analyze it. We're kind of coming toward the end of our time, but I couldn't stop without asking you the current events in the Gulf with the shooting war and reports that plants in Bahrain desalination plants have been hit, perhaps in Bahrain and maybe even Israel. What's your take on the significance of this to the industry, especially in the Gulf? When you're talking to leaders, obviously there's force majeure clauses in all these contracts, but what's your take on what's happening relative to?
I mean, I think the real tragedy is what this war means for Dubai in particular, and the Gulf economy, and the people living there in general. That Dubai, it will be very, very difficult for Dubai to rebuild its reputation as this place where everyone wants to be. And that's going to have a huge impact on the desal market in the long term, because, a lot of these plants are being built largely because population growth on that Gulf Coast. In terms of the actual plants, I think that if you actually look at the details of these things, it's difficult to say that this has been a wholly deliberate policy, because if they were doing it, they would have done it a lot more effectively. And for example, one thing was hit by some debris from one of these drones, and it didn't actually stop it going. I don't think that the Adura plant has actually been brought to a major standstill by whatever happened there. There was another one in Kuwait. The Doha West plant was again hit by debris from something, and then the Kishim island things in Iran. I think that my interpretation of this is that the way that the Iranians want to play it is to cause economic damage to the global economy and make the Americans think twice, rather than actually upset the life of the locals. Although attacking Dubai airport is probably not a great way to win friends and influence people in Dubai. We've been in contact with all these big news agencies. We're in New York Times yesterday, and Guardian, Bloomberg, Reuters. All these people have been in touch, wanting to know where are the desal plants. This is a major panic. All they need to do is sort of hit Jubail, and then bang, Riyadh gets closed down. Actually, it's very unlikely that Riyadh will get closed down, because first of all, there are multiple pipelines going there, and secondly, you've got the Riyadh well field, and thirdly, you've got the population in Riyadh have all got those enormous tanks beneath their houses, and they can go for weeks without worrying. I think that the press have sort of overblown it. However you look at it, is an absolutely sort of tragic situation.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time, and very much appreciate your being on the Salty Water Podcast.
Sure. Well, thanks. And I very much enjoyed it, and look forward to listening to the rest of the series.